attending and voting. That would be great. So Heather Jones voting, Todd Graham,
Here, non-voting.
Teresa King Leclerc,
Here, non-voting.
Susan McCready,
Here voting.
Kate Chaplin,
Here, voting.
Dwayne Bolt,
Here voting.
Robin Sue Tapley is not in attendance. Marie Yarborough,
Here, voting.
Lily Simis, we know is here. And is she supposed to be voting, Christy?
She should be voting.
Yes, he's voting.
And Christy, I have you as here voting.
Yes.
John Bench,
Here voting.
Susan Allen,
Here voting.
John Eisenhower, Ingrid Kashmar is not in attendance. Jim Sawyer,
Here voting.
Heidi Lawson,
Here, voting.
Jessica Stewart,
Here voting.
Jessica Bass, Carrie Hayes, Roger St. Amand.
Here and voting.
All right, Jennifer Bonilla,
Here, not 100% if I'm voting because I could not get onto the Google Doc, so I will vote
I
if
have you.
there's not
voting.
3.
I have you voting.
You have me? Okay,
On the
then
top,
voting.
yeah. Gary Burr,
Here voting.
Tom Reeve,
Here voting.
Darcy Throckmorton.
Here, I'm not voting, I don't think.
That's what it says on there. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Aaron Brown. Okay, and then Tammy Tripler. Do we have Tammy? Nope. Okay. And then we usually, so then let's see, Richard Davis, Marissa Rosensky, Emmy Sawyer, Lindsay Staples, Amy Palmer, Carrie Alley, Darlene Sumner, I mean, Christina Shuey, Rachel Bishop, and Mabel Lunt. Okay. So I have all of that. The approval of a voucher via DocuSign. I did see one, I believe, at the end of last week went around. And then I next have the approval of the minutes from the November 9th meeting. I will take a motion.
So moved.
Who was
Second.
that?
Jennifer.
And then who's second?
Dwayne.
Thank you. And yeah, I think for the motions, if you guys don't mind, let's do that just so that Selena can get everybody's, get the people who moved and seconded. Thank you. Are there any questions, edits, changes to that, the minutes? All right, those in favor, I will be going down the list. Heather, approved. Susan McCready,
Approved.
Kate Chaplin,
Approved.
Dwayne Bolt,
Approve.
Marie Yarborough,
Approved.
Lily Simis. Do we?
Approve.
Okay. Oh, great. Welcome, Lily. Christy LaSquadra, John Bench, Susan Allen, approved. Jim Sawyer,
Approve.
Heidi Lawson,
Approved.
Jessica Stewart,
Approved.
Roger St. Amand. It's Roger. Did we lose Roger?
No, I'm here. I just couldn't unmute myself.
Oh.
Sorry.
Thank you. Jennifer Bonilla,
Approved.
Gary Burr,
Approved.
and Tom Reeve.
Approve.
Thank you, everybody. It was unanimously approved. We have, oh, I see, we have a fifth one. All right, I'll get to that. We have 5 public comments that have been submitted. Mark, I need to read these into the record, correct?
Heather, you can, I mean, they're linked to the agenda. Normally, we receive public comment. If you want to read them into the record, you can. In the past, I can recall one previous meeting where we had a significant topic, you had all of those read in, but other meetings, it's been the will of the board.
All right. I think, unless anyone has any strong opposition, I think that it's probably wise to read it in. It's 5 items. They're not too long, and I think they're also relevant to discussion items that we have on the agenda. If anybody is wholly opposed to that, start vigorously shaking your head no, and we can discuss. Okay, I'm going to go forward with the reading. Dear AOS 91 School Board, we would urge you to consider voting for early dismissal on every Wednesday during the current pandemic. As the health and wellness ambassadors for our school, we are sincerely worried about the mental well-being of our staff. Teachers this year do not have much time to plan due to completely different schedule of specials and lack of safe spaces to work. Much of what they knew about teaching has to be changed and adapted to the new way of teaching Corona style. Group work is no longer possible. Math games and rotations have become a marathon of cleaning and disinfecting playing cards, and book clubs in the class require kids to speak loud enough so that others can hear, but soft enough so that all groups can discuss while being 6 feet apart and wearing masks. Teachers tried to limit circling around the classroom to respect the 6-foot distance between themselves and the students, and educational technicians who provide in-class support have to stay mostly in one place. We probably can all agree that teaching has changed due to the pandemic, and our teachers and staff are doing an amazing job to keep our students safe, happy, and educated, but we do need to realize what an intense pressure this is on the teachers. Recently, we did a survey of our staff to see how we, as the health and wellness ambassadors, can help with the overall health and well-being of our staff. An overwhelming percentage of responses told us that while they appreciate our efforts with the newsletters, monthly challenges, and fitness activities here at school, what they really need is time to adapt to the existing curriculum to make it work in a classroom where desks are spaced 6 feet apart and kids and staff wear masks. Time to adapt the curriculum to meet the standard and offering the best education possible during these strange and unprecedented circumstances. Not only has the job become increasingly demanding, the work has become so much more tiresome due to all-day mask wearing. Teachers are now working evenings and weekends at home to get the job done. Social aspects of the job that make things more bearable have also disappeared. There is not really a space to come together, eat lunch together, talk about the challenges and highlights of the day. There is virtually no interaction between the different grade level staff, and to keep the bubbles or pods as small as possible. In doing this, staff members miss out on social interactions that are so important for general well-being. This time would usually be spent gathering ideas from each other to improve teaching practices, sharing resources, developing plans, and the classroom for the classroom and the school community, and collaborating on special projects. Many teachers.
showing Desi Grubbs?
Somebody needs to mute their speaker. Many teachers and support staff really miss this interaction. As the health and wellness ambassadors, there is only so much we can do. We cannot offer any more time, but you can grant the teachers a little bit of extra time by accepting the proposal for early dismissal on Wednesday so staff and teachers can regroup, plan, and adapt within some of the hours they are paid for, rather than sacrificing even more time on nights and weekends. Sincerely, Brian and Edith, Health and Wellness Ambassadors for Connors Emerson. Then the next one is, let me just make sure I've got this right. Yep. Dear AOS 91 School Board, thank you for all of your efforts on behalf of our school. We know that this is not an easy time to be in education, whether you're a student, teacher, board member, or parent. We appreciate the email from Christy Lasquadro urging open communication between teachers and board members. In that spirit, we would like to ask for your help. Please support the proposal on half days each Wednesday for our elementary schools. We have risen to the challenge of this school year because our students needed us. We see colossal efforts on the part of our students and staff to wear masks, sanitize their hands, and stay socially distanced while still focusing on meaningful learning. However, best practices in teaching don't always match the physical distancing and other COVID precautions. We're constantly rethinking what we know about teaching to fit this new environment. Being a teacher is more demanding than it has ever been. Having a half day every week will give us time to meet with colleagues and plan more deeply to meet each student's unique needs. Some of us are teaching new grade levels and content areas this year. Some of us have larger classes than we used to. We all have students who are working significantly below grade level. Keeping children in pods means teachers are with students for more of the day and therefore have decreased planning time. The staff has met only once since the start of in-person learning. Team meetings, usually a weekly occurrence, have happened intermittently or not at all. Most years we could have a spontaneous conversation in the hall about a student or lesson plan. Now we are more isolated from colleagues and we miss these valuable discussions. All of us would benefit from more time to be the best teacher we can be for our students. Now more than ever, we need to work with our colleagues and plan for interventions and differentiation. But with the pace and schedule of the current school day, there is simply not time. We believe that in-person learning is best for the students, and we would like to stay in person for as long as it is safe to do so. We know the half day each week would be impactful to our community. However, what's best for families must be balanced with what's sustainable for staff. Even with 4.5 days in school, our students will be getting far more in-person instruction than their peers in other parts of the country, state, let alone the rest of the, other parts of the county and state, let alone the rest of the country. A half day weekly would keep all people in our district healthy in body and mind. Thank you for listening. Sincerely, Brian Boardman and Amanda Dyer, co-presidents of the Bar Harbor Teacher Association. The next one I have, hello all. I'm writing to encourage the board to consider a period of remote learning around the December vacation to mitigate the risk of the spread of COVID-19 due to holiday travel and to provide respite for exhausted staff and students. Our community has worked hard during the pandemic to keep everyone safe, and I have no doubt we will continue to do so. I also know that realistically, many of us end up traveling this holiday season, even if we all work to mitigate the risks on the individual level. The risk of the spread of COVID-19 in our schools will inevitably be higher around the holidays. I would like to propose that AOS 91 board member consider a 1 to 2 week period of remote learning before and after December break to further mitigate the risks of the spread of COVID-19 associated with holiday travel. Research shows us that most folks show symptoms of the virus within 5 to 7 days after exposure. Thus, the safest thing to do for travelers would be to quarantine at least 7 days before and after their travel, even with a negative test result. If we went remote before and after December vacation, the members of our community who are traveling during the break would be able to do that, thus lowering the risk of spreading COVID-19 in our schools and potentially keeping us in person for longer. While I understand that remote learning is not ideal, it is also important to note that in-person learning is incredibly challenging. Teachers, staff, and students are all burnt out. I believe switching from in-person learning to remote learning around the holidays might alleviate some of that burnout, enable us to engage more productively upon our return. I hope the MDI RSS administration and the AOS 91 board will consider my proposal to go remote for a week or two before and after December holiday. I truly believe it will increase the safety of our schools and boost morale amongst students and staff. Thank you for listening and have a happy Thanksgiving. Sincerely, Althea Turner, Ed Tech 3 at Trenton Elementary School. The fourth letter is Dear AOS 91 School Board. A common through line from our Safe Return to School Committee recommendation, Commissioner of Education Pender Macon, to Dr. Shaw's November 16th CDC update is that the safest and best place for students to be is in school. As a district, we have all set a goal of having our students learn in person 5 days a week, learning in person 5 days a week in person. We feel that having this priority for our children and families has been forward thinking and important to the overall health and well-being of our students, families, and communities. The proposal to release students for a half day every week is not in line with the recommendations listed above. We understand the complexities of offering teachers and staff the opportunity to plan and meet as teams. That said, we believe that scheduling difficulties are not insurmountable. To that end, we also recognize that each school on the island likely has differing capacity to ensure that teachers and staff get what they need for planning purposes. Without a one-size-fits-all approach that is not responsive to the needs of individual schools and families. Our schools have worked incredibly hard to keep students and teachers in small pods and cohorts as part of our risk mitigation techniques. This is just one of the measures that have helped to keep staff and students safe. Implementing a weekly half day increases the risk for students and staff alike. Parents need to work, therefore they need to send their children to community programs, neighborhood house, YMCA, Harbor House, and in-home daycare. Our students will then be increasing their exposure to others and returning to our schools the next day. In terms of safety and risk mitigation, this is not sound. The best and safest place for our students is to be in school in more controlled environments. Furthermore, losing 3.5 hours a week, 70 hours January through June, the equivalent of 10.5 school days of academic and social opportunity for our students is not sound educational practice. Our students deserve to be in the school interacting and learning with their teachers and peers. Parents deserve consistency of schedule so that they can continue to work during this time of full economic hardship. We have been fortunate to be able to have our students safely at school. We have seen incredible emotional growth, academic progress, and most of all happiness since we have welcomed our students back into the school building. We advocate for continued forward movement, keeping students in person for 5 full days for all schools that can continue with this model. At the very least, we suggest that the board seek feedback from families in the community in regards to this proposal. Thank you for the continued hard work and support to offer to our students, staff, and families. Sincerely, the MDES Wellness Team, which is Tara McKernan, Andrea Howell, Emily Damon, and Wanda Fernald. And let me just open the 5th one. Okay, so the fifth and last letter. Good afternoon. Thank you for your hard work during this tumultuous time. I'm writing to ask the board to consider a period of remote learning following the upcoming high-level vacation. Our health as a community relies on staff and families to honor our exposure protocol. I know that many community members plan to travel during the Thanksgiving break, but especially during the winter holidays next month. The science has been shown that statistically, most people develop COVID symptoms within 5 to 7 days of exposure. A week of remote time post-break would help ensure that school remains one of the safest places during a pandemic by keeping COVID exposures during widespread travel and gatherings from entering our building. A week, while not the official recommended 2-week isolation period, is around the time it takes for most patients to develop symptoms. It would decrease the risk of potential transmission at school without asking caregivers to take on the burden of remote learning for 2 entire weeks. Entering into this period with advanced knowledge will ultimately let us stay in person longer, I believe. It may also lessen some of the stress that comes from constantly wondering whether we will go remote without warning, because we will have taken concrete steps to keep our community safe. Planning a week of remote school after vacation periods when community members will travel for the purpose of isolation before returning to the school buildings will ultimately benefit the school's ability to remain in person, as well as the mental health of the students and staff. Thank you for your time and consideration. Enjoy your upcoming week and stay safe. Warmly, Mia Callahan, 7th, 8th grade at Trenton Elementary School. Okay. just gonna click. So that's the public comment. We move to reports and updates. And Mark, do you have any report or update, or is this the opportunity to have Gary report out?
Yes, Heather, you could start with Gary. And I don't have any major updates. I have a couple of items, and I'm not sure about Julie, but I think we were both planning to do significant updates in December. But if Gary's ready, I think Gary would be a great lead-in. Thank you.
So for everybody, Gary, Mark had asked Gary to do an update since Ingrid can't be here, just on the meeting of this group. I believe it was last week they met to discuss the structure and organization of the AOS. So Gary, you can take it away.
All right. So if Lily or Tammy want to add anything, feel free. So we met, I can't remember the day, they're all running together right now, to discuss how the structure and the limitations of our structure. We talked a little bit about differences between the RSU and AOS, and we discussed, options that have been previously proposed, like Model 5, changing the interlocal agreement, or seeing what we can do within the interlocal agreement. And then we kind of went in the direction of what our new structure needs and where we want to go with our new structure. Like if we could, magically change the structure, what we do, like, reducing the administrative burden on the central office staff. And also looking at what our non-negotiables were, like local controls, local schools owning their buildings, and how to increase like the balance of resources to make sure all our students get the same experiences, which we've been working toward, and what we as a board could do to change it in like phase 1, and then possibly have a phase 2 about where we would have to send things out to voters or change the structure. So I think that's where we are at right now.
Okay.
Gary, just to add, the meeting was held at Harbor House on the 17th, and the next meeting is tentatively scheduled for Monday, December 7th at 6.
Those minutes. All right. Does anyone have any questions for Gary? All right, seeing none. Mark, do you want to just do your few items?
I'll just do a quick one, Heather, because the principals have been doing a great job sending out communications, but I think it's just important for people to continue to monitor their email and the newsletters of principals. And just to a couple of points, not to respond, but to public comment, but if I could give anybody a shout out, it would be, if you're thinking of traveling, please don't. If you want to know what to do, please wear a mask, wash your hands, and stay 6 feet apart. Help is on the way, everyone. A vaccine is coming, and we've worked really hard. I say we, our kids, our teachers, our communities, we've worked so hard. We're so close. We're right there. Hang in there, guys. It's coming. The vaccinations will be on the way for our frontline, front-facing employees, healthcare workers, and most vulnerable. But following that, I'm really confident within the next couple months of vaccines on the way. Let's all do the right thing. It's a huge sacrifice. We're all Thanksgiving and the holidays in December. We're all, by our nature, we want to come together. And I think if we can try to do the opposite and just respect what we've done, we'll be in a great place here come the new year. That's my report at this time, Heather. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Julie, did you have anything that you wanted to report out on? Do I see Julie on here?
I know Julie will be coming up here on the second item. So if you want, Heather, unless you have any questions, we could jump into the budget. I will add, though, the policy committee, we didn't meet in November, and we will meet in December.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, let's jump into the budget, please.
Okay, Nancy, are you, I can't see you. Are you, I hope you're here.
Yeah,
You here, Nancy?
I'm here.
Awesome. Okay, well, first, before we begin, I just have to give, again, we do this every year, but this year is incredibly appropriate to thank Nancy for all her hard work. Um, just, I know you all know this, but for the public, Nancy manages 11 budgets, has to prepare 11 budgets, go through 11 audits. And now, because of the situation we're in, we add to that COVID relief funds and the incredible unyielding timeline that we're in. So with that, I'd like to jump right in. I did share a document earlier this afternoon with the board and the administration. This is a draft budget. This is the first look. And Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong. We're not asking for any action or a vote tonight. This is the first look. So this will be the recommended draft budget, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Before we begin, I'd like to just give a couple overarching comments and then turn it over to Nancy when we go page by page, line by line. For the past several years, we've talked about the AOS as an entity and a structure and who we are and where we want to go. And so there have been things that we've tried to do to support our principals, our buildings and our staff, but timing is everything. And last year, an operations position was included initially in the budget, but because of the growing need and the ever-present need of social emotional needs of our students, we pulled that away. And we were very, very fortunate to have funding to support a second psychological position through some partners in the community and through some very, very generous grants, the Tremont School Fund, the MDI EEF, and support through Acadia Family Center. So we do have 2 school psychologists, but we are still without operations support. And this year, never before, even in the good years, have we ever seen the vulnerability of the AOS more than now, and not having somebody to coordinate operations. Our principals and many, many others have had to step up and really do that work. And that means that our principals and other leaders are not able to focus primarily on teaching and learning, which is really where we want them focusing. So with that, you will see a request for an operations manager. And the goal of that position will be to coordinate maintenance, transportation, logistical, operational needs. To be clear, it is not to take away from the expertise of people we have in our buildings. There is no intent to eliminate any positions or to take away responsibilities. This position is to coordinate and to ensure that we have greater collective purchasing power, continuity with materials and supplies and vendors and bids. That's the goal of this position. Along with that, you'll also see a focus in the budget for asymptomatic testing. We can talk a little bit more about that, but even with all the good news coming on the work with COVID, we anticipate the need to continue to support testing to ensure that our students and staff are safe. So you'll see that included in the budget, as well as some requests for additional days to support the data and assessment coordinator position in central office. That's been a request for 3 years that we've not advanced, but this year we feel it's the opportunity to do so. And lastly, an increase for a stipend amount for a food service director stipend. In planning forward, we did not feel it was appropriate to include that in the maintenance, transportation, and operation manager position. It's just too much to add that piece. There's expertise within our district and within our region, and we hope to tap into that and see if we can bring some continuity in that area. So you'll see that at the end of the budget, but the good news is the overall budget increase without any additional requests is at 0.94%. And as we go into the budget, you'll see as Nancy's walking us through some of the areas where we've been able to show decreases and areas where we're planning forward. But to circle back, that 1% increase, which includes a targeted amount for negotiated agreements, contracts, working agreements, if you fold in all the items I talked about a minute ago, that would bring, if they were all included in the budget, a 9.78% increase. Now, I don't say that lightly because I've never brought a budget forward with those types of increases. And people, I just want to say to the public out there that no, I'm not crazy. The rationale for doing that is to really make sure that we are strategic and we are realizing cost-effective measures. But moreover, I will ask, and working with board chairs and boards and principals, that we need to be cognizant of local budgets. It's not to say that teachers or buildings should do without, but if this is a year where we are looking to potentially increase the AOS, hopefully we can mitigate that by just continuing to be cost efficient at the local level. So Nancy, I'll turn it over to you for the revenue piece, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
Hi, everybody. It's budget season again. On the revenue side of things, we basically, the revenues, the carryover is coming in a bit higher than we anticipated originally, and that's good. We actually, it's coming in a little bit more than when we first put the carryover in. We had more, we actually took around 40,000 we think we can save kind of to help for another year, because the thing is, if you actually put it straight into all of it into next year, then you're going to have a cliff the year after, and that wouldn't be good. And it also would be the year that you would be funding the second psych position also. So that would be prudent to save some of that for the next year and still come in, with a decent figure. The revenues are about the same. We have the reimbursement from the other schools for the OT. It goes by usage. And then we have the funding for the second psych position, which is funded through, as Mark said, the different donations and grants that fund all of that. So then if we turn the page and we go to the first section of the budget, overall, there are no major changes within the budget. We've put in, I don't know if Mark, you want to address, well, you did address negotiated agreements. We put money in that one line for any increases.
So Nancy, that and Heather, that's a common. That's not a new piece. People don't see it every year, but yes, we put in a placeholder for negotiated agreements and work agreements, and you'll see that across all the local budgets. And until we know what the board or those agreements look like, we won't be able to factor in a specific amount. After we do that, you'll see that migrate into the various budget lines.
There are some adjustments throughout the budget in a couple of places because of plan changes for Blue Cross. But for the most part, there are just some minor tweaks to the budget. The deductible coverage, we think we're doing well on that percentage. So we are anticipating at this point, a lot of in our budget where it's so small, we are doing around 70% for now. And we will be hearing from Group Dynamic CHRA also in a follow-up to find out where, if they have some better figures for us. Are there any questions on that first part of the budget?
Nancy, do we know if we're going to hear from Group Dynamics, before our next meeting?
Yes, we should hear from them before then so that we know how we're tracking better than, I've taken what we've got to date and looking at last year's, but you're in a unique situation where you actually, the fiscal year runs over 2 deductible years. So it can go either way a little bit. And that could happen at any point in any one year.
So Heather, I think this would be a good time to inform the board too, and Nancy, jump in if I misspeak, but I'm looking for whatever potential rates would be as set by the benefit trust, as well as our claims against Group Dynamic. I'm hopeful we're going to see really, really good news, but I would caution everybody, in the pandemic, there have been a lot of elective surgeries and things that may normally happen on a typical year that haven't really occurred during COVID. And so we may see numbers that we just need to continue to monitor over the next couple of years. Nancy, did I say that correctly?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's just, I want to be really careful of making some assumptions moving forward until we get past or post-COVID. Thank you.
Okay.
And what we've done as usual is put in a 10%. That seems to be a good placeholder and has been suggested before by the benefits trust to begin with. And then it won't be, well, our budget actually will be passed before we hear anything, because they don't usually start negotiating, I believe, until like February or something like that.
The other good news around that piece is that we're projecting, or the numbers that we're initially seeing in our budgets, that in funding the HRA to maximum exposure, you will not see the same amount as initially put into the budgets. It's basically, we don't have to have the same amounts as the initial startup cost. Is that correct, Nancy?
Yes. Yeah. So on to the next section would be the Office of Superintendent. And that section, there's one item that's the legal fees that we adjusted downward. And that would be considering that we may need some legal fees to do with negotiations, but we felt that we could lower that downward for next year. And then we needed to tweak the office supplies. That's running a little higher for cost, so we upped that a little bit. And then we also actually budgeted for the wellness amount. We funded it kind of through the savings of Blue Cross, but it needs to be in the budget as a single line so that we can actually budget it, not try to remember to put it in as a part of your Blue Cross or something. So basically that, and then you will see that that's where the negotiated agreements line comes in that part of the budget. And then in kind of coordination with that section is my office. And the only thing on the business office mainly is the increase. Each year we host our software for our bookkeeping, and that goes up each year a certain kind of a percentage. It varies a little bit, and we won't know that figure for a little bit. So put in an estimate at this point. Are there any questions that anybody has?
I'm not seeing any hand. Oh, Christy.
This goes toward, I guess, the negotiated agreement line and the 10% Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I think you mentioned this, Nancy, that you know, in most of our budgets, when we find out that those amounts, we lower our budgets to pass on that savings to the taxpayer. But having approved this budget in January, that money never gets taken out of the AOS budget. And so is that what's contributing to the higher than anticipated carryover?
Yes.
I just wonder how
Yes.
do our towns recuperate that money that every year we're putting into the AOS budget that's an overage?
What happens is the next year it would go in as carryover, so that would help your assessment, and it trickles down into each budget by your formula.
The other factor is too, Christy, it's a good point, and yes, it does not get spent, but in proportion to the other budgets, you can see that it does reflect positively through the carry forward.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you, Christy. I don't see any hands. Yeah, go, Nancy.
Okay, I didn't see. The next section is the technology section of the budget. And basically there are a couple of tweaks there with the phone and software, but other than that, there really aren't any major changes in that section of the budget. Are there any questions on that part? Okay, I don't see any hands. Special services. We had a couple of adjustments on Blue Cross and then a couple of downward adjustments in that section. But basically nothing else. And then as part of special services, the psych providers, what I did was I took, because we had a one-liner last year that was the 90 grand for the second position. So I've distributed that 90 grand in the salary and benefits lines of the budget. So you'll see the budget figures include that 90,000 in there. And then there were a couple of changes. Of course, they were new hires, so there's some adjustments on salary and bennies. And then there are a couple of adjustments because there are 2 people now in that section. We need to adjust a couple of lines like the dues and fees and supplies and travel for minor amounts. Are there any questions on that section?
Don't see any.
Okay. The next section is occupational therapists, and these positions are funded by usage. And what happens is you'll see that, remember on the first page, it's in your revenue, and it's a wash basically through the AOS budget. And then what I do is bill out twice a year to each of the school budgets based on usage. So it gets funded actually through your individual budgets. And then the last section would be the social worker, and that would be the 20%. We pay 20% of Edie's salary through the AOS, which is 80% by Harbor, and then the AOS gets a 20%. So that's basically just a carryover from the year before on that one. And that's it in a nutshell, actually, for the budget itself.
So Heather, just to circle back, if you go down and you look at Nancy, you've done an amazing job to bring forward. If we were to do nothing else, to have a less than 1% increase, that's amazing work. That includes a placeholder for the healthcare and the benefits for employees. But to put it into context, if you look at the additional items, we've tiered them. I did have a conversation with a couple of board members earlier today, and I think it's fair to say, why would we put it $80,000 for testing if we believe we're going to have a vaccine? Well, I think the answer to that question is, why do we purchase insurance? And nothing is guaranteed. We want to make sure that we're well positioned If in the event that we have a vaccine and things are moving forward positively, and we don't have to expend that money, so be it. But at this point, I think it would be prudent for us to invest in an asymptomatic testing program, as many colleges and universities and other entities are doing for their forthcoming budgets. So that's an $80,000 cost. And I'm just going to give another quick shout out to the Jackson Lab, the hospital, and in particular, Bar Harbor and Bank and Trust. We would not be in a position to fully fund that entity for this year for employees at no cost to our budgets. So that's the cost of an asymptomatic testing program, and that's our number one priority. And then you can see the other considerations, operations, data and assessment. That's not an increase to the salary. Those are additional days in the summer. And then lastly, the food service stipend. So thank you,
And
Heather.
Mark, the operation and transportation
Yes.
position, that includes both salary and benefits, correct?
Yes, and thank you, Heather. And just so folks know, we just didn't throw a number out there. We used Maine school management data. We looked at districts of similar size, demographics, and positions. If this is supported, and again, this is a conversation this evening, I will provide information to the board and the public showing a breakdown of similar costs in other districts. And a projected job description as well. So, but that does, yes, Heather, include salary and benefits projected for that position.
Okay. Questions? Christy and then Lily.
Sorry if I missed this explanation last month because I wasn't at the meeting. And you said that asymptomatic testing is $80,000. We had talked about this back in the fall, and the price tag on that was like $300,000. So have you received donations? Is that what you're referring to from like Bar Harbor Savings and Loan, or is that just because it's only for the spring? Like, why is that price tag so much different?
There's a lot of factors in that, Christy, and that everything you said is accurate. Our initial projections were really, really high, but then we broke it down to the fact that what we're doing now is we're working with so fast forward, a lot of research development and companies have come online with COVID. So simply put, more competition, more entities, it's more cost effective. And that number initially was including what our 200 test kit donations were. But the real delta in all that was how we were going to process those kits and then supply the additional kits to manage the gap between what the Jackson Lab provided us and what we would need for the whole year. Does that make sense, or do you want me to go on further?
Thank you. Lily.
For this year, though, I will say yes, we have the Jackson Lab test kits, which have been converted. We have a grant through MDI Hospital. We also have support from Bar Harbor Bank and Trust for this year. But next year, and the delta that we had to navigate was about 40,000 next year to do a complete year for all employees. And that is for the entire year. The cost that I've been given through the hospital is to budget approximately $80,000.
Thank you, Mark. Lily.
I'm just curious with the recent situation with the state of Maine providing tests to the Walgreens for free of charge to anybody who qualifies within their questionnaire. Is there anything coming down the pike for schools in the state? I feel like schools should be right up there with the general public. I'm just, it kind of baffles me that there isn't something at least being talked about on a state level to help our students and staff.
Heather, may I?
Please.
I'm not, Lily, it's a great question. We continue to monitor the updates on a regular basis and provide those to you. But I think what you're referring to are the Binax Abbott test kits, which are rapid test kits. We've had little information come to us directly as superintendents or administrators. The nurses have had communications. Our nurses have been monitoring that. We've been exposed to some webinars. My understanding of those kits is that we put a placeholder in and with the DOE in terms of how many students or staff we would need, and we've heard nothing at this point. My understanding, and don't quote me on this, is that those test kits are now being deployed out into community resources, like what you mentioned, Walgreens and other entities. So I don't know if that's going to shift. I haven't heard that it is. I also don't know if they're projecting to provide schools or other entities with those test kits, but I will research it. You know, again, if there are, I think where you may be going is, Mark, if there are other resources, why would we put that in there? And I would agree. I just don't know that those resources exist. So at this time, I think the prudent thing to do is budget until we know for certain.
Oh, I didn't mean to sound critical of you putting it there. I'm just curious that it seems like the state is really stepping up, and I'd like to see them step up to our students and educators.
I didn't interpret it that way, Lily. And I would also say we don't know what the federal government will do come January. There may be some shift in resources there. That's highly likely. Well, I'm not sure.
Other questions? I'm not seeing anybody's hand. So, Mark, if I remember correctly, we'll have this on the December agenda. It's December 14th. Hold on. Trying to mute Tammy. Tammy, you mute yourself. There, thanks. Mark, we'll see this on the December agenda, and at that point in time, we'll have to take action on it.
Yes, and you know, to any of the, I know this is the first day that the board is seeing this, and some of the questions or comments that have come up, we'll continue to research. But if you have any questions or any information you'd like in advance of the next meeting, please let Nancy and I know. You know, we'll go through this again, and if there are areas that we can look to streamline, we will. But yes is the answer, Heather.
Okay. Marie has a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, in advance of the meeting, will we have a job description and some scope and sequence of the position, the transportation director position?
I think that's a great idea. You know, one, we have to refresh our memory. We've talked about this, and I think also, you know, for the public to understand what we're thinking about. And Marie, I'm sorry, I think I cut you off.
That's okay. And then follow up is, I think it's also, if there's a way that, I know this is an AOS thing, but I find it's also hard if we don't get a chance to discuss it at our local board levels. It's always hard when we have these really big things and we're discussing them in a sort of a short period of time. Some of us like to take a little bit longer to think about it. I know it's not necessarily the chain of command of how we typically have these discussions, but it would be great if there were ways that we can, when there's these big things coming up, if the opportunity to talk with at our local school board level, which gives the public another chance to sort of weigh in or at least know that that discussion is happening. And then in addition, it helps us to check in with our local administrators as well. So we can ask some poignant questions at that level too. So I know it's all about timing. We have weirdness when these things come out. Sometimes they don't come out in the right order, but I would say that that's probably the most helpful, I feel like, for me as someone who's trying to think about and wrap my head around it.
Marie, to the last part, I think that's very important that you have those conversations with the building principals and at the local level. And yes, I will absolutely provide the data, salary benefit piece, and a draft of the job description. You'll have that before the December meeting.
Any other questions? Okay. Oh, yep, Christy.
I'm just gonna backtrack to what Marie just said. If it's possible, Mark, to get that job description before our local meetings in December, that might be even better. So just fill it up if you have time.
That's Christy and yeah, this is 95% done because we've been talking about this for several years. I just want to do some streamlining, but absolutely, I will have that to you guys very, very quickly.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. So then I will have us move on to the early release proposal.
So Heather, if I may, just real quickly, because I'd like to turn it over to Julie. I first want to give a shout out to our teachers, our staffs, our building principals. It's the shift to remote learning has been difficult on everyone, our students, our families, our staff, but people have done an incredible job. This proposal comes forward as a result of really recognizing that we are teaching and learning looks different. It just does. And we've learned a lot. And so the building principals are really looking across the district to provide more support for ultimately for our kids, but for our teachers in really continuing to do their jobs very, very well. I will start off by saying that this proposal, I'm sure that there are going to be varying views on what the best time or day might be. I get that. There are some logistical pieces that right now in the present we have to be cognizant of. And the first is no matter whether the board does or doesn't support, Wednesdays really are very difficult. I hate to use the term non-negotiable, but because of logistical and bus and transportation issues, and primarily where the high school schedule's at, we took that off the table as administrators. So I just wanted to give context to that. And if board members have questions about that, Matt Haney can speak to that. Secondly, there was, consideration of other days, and we took the approach to say there is no optimal day, but moreover that if this proposal in some capacity is supported, students will still be in school 5 days a week. They'll be in school 5 days a week. We can count hours or minutes, but they will be in school 5 days a week. But the other piece to recognize is our teachers need support, and they need it now. So we looked long and hard, and our schools are in different places, as we heard through public comment. But at the end of the day, for consensus and continuity, the administrators would recommend a Thursday early release. Not to say that that couldn't be revisited down the road, not to say that there aren't other times to look at, but for the sake of consideration of this proposal, that's what the administrative team is recommending at this time. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Julie. And I just want to thank Julie, the principals, and everyone that worked really hard to roll up their sleeves and try to find consensus. It's really hard when we're dealing with 9 different schools, which we are, but I just want to give a shout out to those people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Julie, you want to jump in, please?
Thank you, Heather. Good evening, everybody. I do want to just reiterate what Mark just said and really emphasize that this is not my proposal. This is not the district's proposal. This is a proposal of the elementary principals and really the entire A team. That's important because obviously, as we all know, whenever we try to negotiate a through line for the district, you're going to have people on different sides of it, but this was what people could come to consensus on. I'm going to, not that this is very visual, because really what I did was I took the proposal that got emailed to you and put it onto 8 slides. So maybe that would be a little bit more visual. I think Josh, can you put that slideshow up and show that? Beautiful. And just go ahead to view. Thanks. And go ahead to the second slide. There's only 8. I promise it won't take that long. So why are we asking for a weekly early release at this time in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic? I think as you heard in the letters, 2 of the letters very clearly, K-8 teachers need more time to do all of the following. One issue is that they've got students attending in person, and every single logistical situation has to be thought through in a different way. So whatever you want kids to be doing, you need to be thinking about those parameters, and that takes time. We have students who are starting to go out on quarantine, or who somebody in their family is out on quarantine. We do not have any flex for teachers to get their heads around, like, how are we going to do this in a way that is going to meet kids' needs? We have 8th grade virtual academy students, and we have students in the virtual academy who are connected to the local schools, the K-7 140 plus students. And teachers want to connect with those students, want to connect with the 8th graders, want to connect with their, a lot of those students receive services and support from the local school. And there really isn't time other than when there were students during the entire school day to actually reach out to those families and to those students. We are under the reality that at any time we could be asked to go to remote learning, and we want that to be high quality. And you can't just make a plan for that and have bags lined up by the door and then just have those be really adequate if six weeks later you go out to remote learning. Those need to be updated. They need to be thought about. They need to be thought about in connection with what you're currently doing. As was mentioned, there really isn't much time. In some buildings, there's no time to meet and plan with colleagues. Some buildings have not had any staff meetings, or only 1 or 2 since the beginning of the year. We have many colleagues, many teachers who are teaching subjects for the first time because we've tried to go into pods. And so we have adults matched with students, matched with subjects that they might not ever have taught before. So we have ed techs who are teaching. We have one teacher who is a specials teacher teaching 4th grade. We have another teacher who was teaching in another area of the school, who's now working with students in one pod, and then other groups have been split into 3. And so it's sort of a round robin, and there's somebody has to be with the kids at all times. And there isn't the ability to schedule the same kind of quality of planning time. And there is certainly no time to share best practices. I have not had a common study since school started. They don't have time within their buildings to talk. We felt like this issue of time needed to be dealt with before we started adding additional pieces that people had agreed to do on a voluntary basis occasionally, but really can't get to right now. If I could have the next slide. This whole idea that there is a COVID-related learning slide and teachers need to be looking at student work and looking at data and planning for RTI and how they'll respond to the targeted new student needs, it's not happening because they don't have time to meet. And the next slide, please. K-8 special education teachers are in a very specific situation. They need more time to train new ed techs. New ed techs came on into this situation of teaching and learning with no time to actually meet with their supervisors. The special education teachers need to make sure that learning and behavior plans are being carried out for students on their caseload. That's both in person and remote, and don't have time to check in with all the other people that they need to, the classroom teachers, the remote teachers. And they have no time to work with other special education colleagues on tasks that are mandated by the upcoming special education audit. Next slide, please. I think it's also very important for the board to understand that despite working under similarly strenuous conditions as their high school counterparts, K-8 teachers do not have the same amount of planning time as the high school teachers do. I will tell you, the high school teachers do not feel like they have any extra time. They are using all of that time to be teaching for students in person, students who are attending remotely, and trying to make sure that kids are getting RTI and getting supports. They are using every moment of that time. The K-8 teachers don't have nearly as much. Next slide, please. I think it's important for the board to consider how students will benefit from this. After all, students are the center of why we are all involved with this endeavor. I really do believe that overall educational programming will be more coherent. I think that teachers will be able to collect and review evidence of learning and will be able to do progress monitoring. And I'm not sure that's happening in a strategic and ongoing way at this time. We talked about the students needing to miss school because of quarantine. Teachers are also needing to go in and out because of quarantine. There just isn't time to plan for that. We mentioned the remote students before, and they really are needing the connection with their teachers. And there is all kinds of theoretical possibility for interdisciplinary program planning, but we can't get to it without any planning time. Next slide, please. As Mark said, students will still be in school 5 days a week under this plan. We were very deliberate, not asking for a full day, not asking for a late start, keeping routine in place, making sure that kids and teachers are connecting with one another, students are seeing their peers. This enables us with a 4.5 day plan to maintain continuity of learning. It allows students to access services and supports, and it promotes social emotional learning and mental health. And we're very, very cognizant of the fact that these are incredibly important. Next slide, please. So here are the nuts and bolts. As Mark said, the proposal is that the release day would be on Thursdays. The early release days would begin January 7th, which would be the Thursday after the winter break. The timing would be the same as on an early release due to weather. So an 11:30 dismissal with teacher collaborative building-based planning time. This is not district time. We have been in touch with partners, including Harbor House, the YMCA, and Camp Beach Cliff, and they are all examining what they would be able to do to support working families. We would want students to be kept in consistent pods at these centers so that contact tracing could occur, and we're mitigating the kind of exposure concerns. Yes, there would be more exposure, but we also know that kids are playing together. There's lots of other ways that kids are coming together. We want to do this in a way that would be safe for everyone, and all of those organizations have said that they would be enforcing strict protocols, safety protocols. So the calendar for the K-8s in the high school still stays extremely closely aligned. The early release days that high school have either been aligned to the Wednesday flex days or to the Thursday early release for elementary. And that has meant that there's a number of calendar changes that are associated with the proposal. Selena sent out 2 attachments to you. One was a summary that I did of what the actual month-by-month impact would be. And the second is what the calendar would actually look like. So I'm hoping you have those in front of you. There are a couple of changes that we're recommending in conjunction with this proposal. Most important is probably that we would be taking away the February 12th Professional Development Day and the half-day Professional Development Day on March 12th. That would become, that week would have just the Thursday half-day. We've tried to consolidate so that any week that has a Monday holiday, of which there are only 2, January to June, that there's no early release on those weeks. And then we've also aligned, we had early release days on different days because we were aligning the K-8 and the high school calendars. And now they've all been aligned to either the Wednesday flex day for the high school or for K-12 on the Thursdays. We're recommending that we take that day and a half that would have been district professional development time, and we do 2 things with it. One is we make some district offerings during the early release days in February. That doesn't mean everybody would do, it would still be building based, but it would enable us to do some additional training of ed techs to bring together some of the groups that may want to have a common study across buildings, et cetera. By taking that day and a half, we would like to move it back to the time around the transition to semester 2. So right now we have a half day on the Friday and a full day on the Monday for between semester 1 and semester 2. And what we're proposing is that we have a full day on a Friday and a full day on a Monday. So there'd be a 4-day period. So we could finish out semester 1 with all report cards and all of that, and then plan for semester 2, which is going to involve some shifting of groups we anticipate and some shifting of spaces, and then begin the second semester as was on our current calendar, January 26th, which is a Tuesday. That's aligned with the high school, and that part would be consistent K-12. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I think that's the last slide. I'm hoping so. Yeah, that's number 8. That's all. So we can make that go away. Thank you so much, Josh, for changing the slides. And I'm happy, and I will also open it up to the principals to take questions.
I see John Eisenhower's hand.
Just in case I missed it, is there any, with this change, are we still entirely aligned with the high school?
We are not entirely aligned with the high school, but the high school has aligned all of its early release days and changes in the 9-week and semester breaks either to its flex day on Wednesday or to the Thursday early release.
Okay.
So families who have kids at both schools would have similar schedules.
Lily and then Christy.
Is this, when you sat with all the principals, did you hash out sort of every possible scenario and this is the best case scenario, or is there any room for discussion of other possibilities of creating time for the teachers? I'm fully in support of giving them time. I'm just curious if this is it more effective to have a big chunk of time like this, or to maybe figure out how to shorten every class and create 30 or 40 minutes every single day, where some teachers could, not every teacher would have that time every day, but maybe 3 days a week or something, or is that just a complete nightmare? That's one question, but go ahead.
So I want to let the principals respond to that. I don't think that everyone on the board quite understands how compressed these schedules are, how much teachers are with kids during lunch. It's pretty crazy. And the fact that there's no bigger chunk to get a lot of things done is significantly impacting the quality of what teachers feel they're able to provide right now.
Right. I was just curious if once a week is, if that's the most effective or just the best solution that all of you came up with. Obviously, I don't know what it's like every day, and to try to figure out the schedules. I was just wondering if a little bit of time every day, and the kids could maybe have a 40-minute free
So to
period.
that, I see Jandria's hand and Mike Zabore's hand too. I'm guessing they might be responding to Julie's comment of having principals respond.
Sure.
So Jandria and then Mike.
So thank you very much, Heather. I would just add that it's not just an issue of time. In some of our buildings, it is sincerely an issue of space. That I have desks in the hallways right now, which is where teachers are going to plan. I have pictures of them with their Hannaford shopping carts that they're using to move their equipment and materials from one classroom to another every hour on the hour, going between middle school classes. And then for their planning period, they are sitting at desks in the hallway because there are no rooms and no spaces that are untapped in, at least in my building. And Mark can speak to the fact that we have explored other possibilities in the town of Tremont to try to have as spillover spaces, and the obstacles that and hoops that we would have to jump through in order to use those other facilities wouldn't allow us cost-wise to do that. And also just, it's not something that would be realistic within this time, this school year. So I would just say it's not just an issue of time for teachers. There is no space for them to meet. Even if we could figure out what to do with the students, there is no place for teachers to go where there are not students there.
Thank you, Jandria. And Mark did tell me that Carrie Hayes has a question, so I put you on my list, Carrie. Mike, do you want to respond too?
Yeah, thank you, Heather.
Not yet.
Andrea, pretty much nailed it. But I would also add to that, the personnel to be able to cover those classes. If you're trying to compress, it makes it really difficult to find people, especially if you're already having people who are out for various reasons. Staffing is pretty thin at this point. But Jandria pretty much nailed what I was going to share in terms of the space issue. That's another big one. And I think having 40 minutes just won't do it doesn't give you the time to do what you need to do. And I could speak to that later when other things come up.
Okay, thanks. Christy. Oh, I'm sorry. Before you go to Christy, Barb, I see you. Did we lose? I don't know. I can't see Barb now.
Barb, if you're talking, you're on mute.
All right. We'll come back. Are there other principals that want to add? Can you all hear me? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Barb, I will keep toggling back and forth, and if you want to pipe in, just jump in. Christy, you had a question.
My question was just for Julie. Would this be the plan if we ended up having to go full remote? We would keep this early release day for teachers. So I'm just trying. I know like the schedule won't exactly look the same when we go full remote as it does when we go to school, but this would still be the plan. The teachers would count on this time on Thursdays would always be their time, whether we're in school or remote, correct?
That's what I would recommend, yes. Just to go back to Lily's question. So there's the things that you can do maybe in the 30 to 40 minutes that turns into 20 to 25 minutes in the hallway, but you don't even have those times anymore to connect. They're not there because there's somebody else is covering if you're not with kids. But the other thing is there's just no time to kind of sit down and say, okay, so what are we going to do for this next unit? Or what are we, let's take a look at what we're seeing with the kids and check in and go through all the kids and talk about what we each know so that we can figure out how to go forward. There's no time to do that.
Okay.
Thank you. I totally appreciate that. I just was curious about other options, possibilities, but thank you.
I had Carrie Hayes has a question.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, I'm driving, so I apologize if I don't sound great, but I have a couple things. One is I'm wondering if there is any opportunity and any funding available if we wanted to try and do just small groups of kids who really are not able to, maybe participate in some of these other programs. I'm thinking especially about maybe special needs kids who, being put in with a group in Harbor House, it might be difficult for them, and have them at the schools. And is there transportation provided for these kids who would participate in any after-school programming like that, whether it be at the different community centers or if we could put something together after school? And then my second question would be, if we do give the teachers this time on these half days, I'm wondering if we can set up ways for them to work together across the different schools so that the, say, grade 4 and 5 teachers have time to plan together, where they might have more, more in common with their peer teachers than they would with having meetings with an 8th grade teacher and a kindergarten teacher. I know that some of the teachers at Tremont have asked about something like that.
So let me take that last question first. And I really would like these to be building based, because we have people who are new and they're not even able to talk to the other people who are working with the other half of the 2nd grade or the other third of the 3rd, 4th grade. And I anticipate that there will be teachers, and we've always respected that in this district. If somebody, that's what we would call a common study, a 4th grade common study. And if they wanted to take an hour out of that 3 hours to do that, they would still have 2 hours to be able to plan with the people in their building. It's really, I can't stress how much that chunk of time is what's needed. But I would want that to come from teachers, and I think it will. I think that people are really missing getting to talk to their colleagues, and people are so overwhelmed that, as one teacher said, I'm almost afraid to ask the other people teaching, because I just know how crazy and overextended they are, and I know that they'll try to respond, and it just adds to everybody's stress. The first piece that you said about transportation, so the 3 community partners that we have talked to are Harbor House, Beach Cliff, and the Y. There is already transportation to Harbor House and the Y from Connors Emerson and from Tremont, and obviously Pematic can walk over. Mark and I have talked about how we could figure out, if Beach Cliff is able to offer a program, how we could figure out how to do some transportation to get kids there. I don't know about getting them home. I think it's going to depend on numbers. I think it's going to depend on, how creative we can be to maybe get kids back to accessible pickup spots. I'm not sure. But I think these are all problems that we can put our minds to and our resources to, should you all decide that you're going, would be in support of the proposal.
All right. Other question, Lily.
Sorry, I just want, how much prep time, like without COVID and all this craziness, how much prep time do teachers normally have each week? Like, is this?
I'm gonna leave that to the principals, and you are going to quickly understand that there isn't one answer, and there isn't even one answer for all.
like,
people in the same
the
building.
reason I'm asking is because I think it's an interesting solution to the problem. Then it's unusual. We're in an unusual situation. I'm actually concerned that it might not be enough, and that's all. I'm just
Maybe Barb
curious.
wants to respond to that. I think Barb's back.
I think, sorry, I apologize for the glitch before. Lily, I can only speak for Connors Emerson, but typically in years past, they would have 7 prep periods a week of about approximately 40 minutes. And during those prep times, 2 of those would be either grade level or team times to meet. And the one thing I don't think people have taken into account, maybe, or maybe as explicitly as I'd like to explain, is that our teachers have to stay 3 to 6 feet separated from each other, right? So they can't have a passing conversation in the hall. They can't go between one building to the next. They can't go between one wing and the next. And they have 20 minutes for lunch, or they have 20 minutes for recess duty. They are outside with their class. It's no longer a grade level recess. It is a class recess. It is a class lunch. It is a class break. And so they just, the specials we're offering right now are anywhere between 30 and 35 minutes. And as Jandria, spoke eloquently, there just isn't space, to even, take a walk or, go to a different spot, in the school, because we're all really trying to be safe and not commingle. And it's just had a devastating effect on staff, and honestly, the kids are exhausted as well. We're surprised, but our kids are really tired. They're outside a lot more. Whether or not they're picking up on the angst, in the news or the families or whatnot, I can't tell you, but it's been an extraordinary effort. As I said to our board, in my 40 years of education, I have never seen staffs work harder. There's just no doubt. They're working incredibly hard, but they're also exhausted. And I had 8 people out today. I can't we're not going to survive with 8 people out and 10 people out, et cetera. We don't have the capacity right now, unfortunately.
And I think you also need to understand that typically people would have IEP meetings physically in the same room, or other meetings physically in the same room. Now they have to find a place where they can do it remotely from different places but they have to also be away from kids, but that's what their planning time would have been. And
folks are in cars, outside in cars.
To have a meeting about kids. Anyway.
I'm not negative. I'm just trying to understand everything,
And I also want to say, Lily, that the principals have been very, very creative, and some of them have been able to carve out recently more planning time for some of the teachers. I just want to pay very, very strong attention to the fact that the teachers in many of the buildings are saying this is what would make it so that they could do a job that they felt good about. Our teachers are very hard on themselves. They don't feel like they're doing the quality of job for kids that they want, and yet they are so constrained and so exhausted that they keep doing what they need to do, but they're not feeling like they're doing what they want to be giving kids. I don't know if a half day a week will cut down on people being out, but I will say that in all the buildings, there's been tremendous difficulties in covering people when they're out. And that's added to additional stress and means that people might not get the breaks that they might otherwise get. So I think the principals are trying to create some break time, obviously, and some planning time. I don't think it's enough, and it doesn't allow teachers to work together, which is really a lot of what's missing.
Thank you. All right. I saw Mark, Christy, Todd, and Jandria. That's on that screen. Anybody else? Okay. Mark.
So not to belabor the point, but I think the board is getting a real sense, and I'm really pleased that the principals are weighing in, that we are not in the same place in every building, and resources look different, spaces look different. If the board chooses to support this proposal, it doesn't mean that the proposal cannot be revisited. It certainly means that if we move forward, like anything else, we take feedback, we evaluate, we take feedback from parents, from staff, from students, we evaluate, but we are in extraordinary times, and I just can't say enough and echo how much our teachers need this support right now, because they are in fact doing the very best they can, but I think we can do more to help them. And this is one way that the principals have coalesced. And in fairness, is everybody in exactly the same place in the proposal? No. But through consensus, this is our best recommendation at this point in time. And if we're fortunate enough to receive support, we can revisit that and evaluate that. Thank you, Heather.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I have Christy.
I was just going to say that I had emails from two teachers recently. And one of the things they mentioned is that there's a number of teachers who are so stressed out and exhausted that they're considering putting in a leave of absence for next semester. And that scares me to death, because we're already so short-staffed that how could we function if we had multiple teachers asking for leave? And so I think we are in a bit of a crisis. I think we have to figure out how to help these teachers get a break. And if this is step one of giving them a half day, I mean, I support it 100%. And I hear the worry from the MDES wellness teams about, this could be, this impacts our communities, but it would impact our community more if our schools can't function. So I think that, we have to take this step. But I wonder how we can fund additional help for schools. If we need additional ed techs, we need additional full-time substitutes. And even if we fund those positions, I worry that we don't have any people who will take those jobs. And so I was asked by a teacher to think deeply about how we can support them. And I'm trying, but I think we really need the input of Julie and our principals and the teachers who are watching, because I think it's really important to keep our schools open. And I'm really nervous. I'm really nervous that we're going to start losing teachers. And if things don't improve for next year, where we go then. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Christy. Todd.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. So it's obviously clear we need to find time for our teachers to collaborate and prepare. I just wonder about this proposal, if this really is enough for them. And I think of it in terms of conversations we had throughout the summer and into the fall, where we all agreed that every school was going to look a little different as we went through this. And I wonder if there are going to be some schools who need more than this early release, and other schools that are going to maybe need a little less. I would jump right on with Christy's thought about trying to find funding and finding as many people as we can to give them whatever they need in staffing. I think they're due that from us, to look for new ways and creative ways to help them. But I'd also was going to mention what Mark did earlier, and that is, I believe we need to reevaluate this in another month's time and see who needs more and who needs less.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Todd. Jandria.
Heather, I'm just going to withdraw my comment. Right now, I don't think there's anything else I can do but just reiterate and reiterate and reiterate. So I'm going to pass. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Rhonda. Rhonda, you're on mute.
Sorry, I get into Google Meets mode and I'm hitting the buttons to.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to reiterate for a moment. We do have people teaching things that they've never taught before. We have people who are teaching the same content that they have for years, but in completely different ways because of that 6-foot distancing, because we have to keep kids away from each other. They're learning technology that they didn't even know existed a couple of months ago. So there are all those pieces. The students deserve the best instruction that we can provide. And the teachers right now are right out straight. Julie mentioned it, that they're doing the best they can and they want to be doing better. And 4.5 days, to me, well planned collaboratively, is way better than 5 full days. Using that time well is going to mean a lot for our kids. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhonda. Lily.
So every single principal that has spoken is I'm hearing that this really might not be enough. So I think maybe what Todd said, we start and revisit, but and I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what our mandates are for days and whatnot, but can you have 4 full days of kids in school and 1 day where teachers just are working at the school together all day, preparing for the next week? I don't know. I'm just really nervous that this is a wonderful beginning, but I'm not quite sure it's enough.
Okay, thanks, Lily. Tom, did you have your hand up? Okay, Julie, you wanted to respond?
I just want to say that the principals have worked really, really hard to craft a proposal that centers the students and also centers impact on families and also thinks about what would be definitely helpful based on what teachers themselves are telling us. One of the things we did do is we wanted to make sure that the half day we were proposing was, even after a half an hour transition, a full 3 hours. I also know that the principals are working, as we learn more about COVID parameters and as we get better at doing education in this way, at being more, to the extent they can, creative to give people more time than they had all fall. And I'm hopeful that the combination of those two things, and please, if you could get us some more floating subs in some of these buildings, that would be wonderful. However, I would just say some of these schools have had ads out for people for quite a long time and nobody is coming forward. So I think we have to be realistic and we have to paint create a path that is going to do the most we can while minimizing harm and disruption and maximizing the quality and amount of learning time, since kids have missed so much school. And I think there's not going to be a perfect answer. I appreciate your listening very carefully to the proposal. I appreciate the fact that we would want to revisit. And I also really deeply appreciate that you are a board who wants to support our teachers.
Thank you. Todd.
I'm just going to say again, it's important to me that if someone's going to make a motion, which I cannot do tonight, that it includes revisiting what the principals really need after a month or 6 weeks of this. I'm afraid that some are going to need more and maybe others have found other creative ways and they can be in school for longer. So I'd like to hear that, or I'd like to hear someone, either Mark or Julie, address that, as that we do plan to revisit this to make sure that the principals are getting what they need.
I'd be happy, Heather, may I?
Yep, please.
I'd be happy to address that, Todd. Thank you. I think this is a very significant topic. I don't disagree that I think it's very, very important. This is the first time we've had this discussion publicly. I think in advance of any action by the board, it's really important to survey teachers. It's really important to survey parents. I would hope that, like we do with significant policies, I might respectfully suggest and or recommend that this could be, in fact, a first reading, and then the board could take or consider action in December with the plan that we still look forward to implementing if approved in January. That would give us time to do some assessment, to find if there are other comments or other folks that would like to weigh in on this, and gather any more information. But if that course is chosen, Todd, certainly within a month's time, February or March, circle back and find out if that meets the needs of all of our schools. And I'll close with this. As Julie said, this is not district time. This is not time devoted to any district considerations or decisions. This is time for teachers and for staff, and it should be building based. So I agree with that, Todd, and that would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Todd, and thank you, Mark. Is there, yep, Marie.
There we go. Just to kind of reiterate too what Chrissy said, you know, the letters that we got, some letters from our teachers, and some of them are public here and some of them weren't sent to the AOS, but you know, there's no doubt in my mind that our teachers and our staff at Connors Emerson, as across the district, are working harder. I mean, it's just, there's a lot going on, and they're rising to the occasion. I can say, you know, when I put my parent hat on, you know, I have a child that I feel like is kind of in like normal school. I never could have imagined at the beginning of this that I would be able to say a sentence like that. But the work that our school has done and across the district, but just what I know one-on-one with our teachers, is just incredible. The experience that they're giving them is about as close to normal as I ever could have imagined. And I know it's not. So I know that the teachers are putting that burden on themselves. So I just want to reiterate, you know, who we hear from is we hear these, you know, we hear it and we can see it. It's easier for us to forget it when we're pulling up in our little car and dropping our kids off and they're walking away to start their day. It's easy to forget that, even though that's so normal for us, that there's a price that's being paid on the other side of that with our teachers and our administrators. So I think I also hear what Todd is saying, and I think it's really astute just to remind us that, again, like our schools are in different places across the district, and to go ahead and to acknowledge that we strive for standardization. You know, we're striving for the same things to be similar, but just to acknowledge that it may not be similar in other places. As Todd said, and as Lily said, it may need to be more in some places. But for me, it seems like a really sort of, other than obviously, I don't want to say it's a small price to pay, because I don't want to minimize the impact that this is going to have on working parents. And I don't want to minimize the impact that it might have in terms of us sort of losing more kids. And we talked about that at the high school level, that we've lost some kids. And that's not a good place for us to be. So I don't want to minimize the impact on working parents or losing more kids. But in that vein, it is a relatively small price to pay to give the teachers something that they desperately need, so they can work together and make what they've got as the best possible educational experience that they can have for themselves as professionals, and that they can give to our teachers. You know, I feel like I will benefit from that. But I just want to acknowledge that I'm hearing it, I'm seeing it, whether or not I want to see it, but I know it's there behind the smiles. I know it's there, and I do think we are obliged to do something about it.
Thank you, Marie. Jandria, I saw your hand.
Sorry, just quickly. A lot of times when we've been talking about this, it's come up, you know, the concern for losing time with students and whatnot. And I hear that very much, but I just want to remind people that this is actually common practice in many school districts, other than ours, that other school districts do take half days regularly and have been doing so for years. So I really think I have so much faith in the administrators in this district, and just immeasurable faith in our teachers to be able to, who are handling this with their mouths quiet, like they're not complaining about this. They are showing up every day excited to see their students, and they are handling this with such grace. And they are rock stars pushing their shopping carts through the hallways. And you know, they just are amazing. But this is not uncommon in other districts to have the 4.5 days. So I just want us to keep that in mind, only because I think that you know, other school districts do this and they get great results. And I'm not advocating for this beyond this point at all, but just to say that this is not new. We're not the first district to do this, and to find the time to be well used and beneficial to students and teachers. So I just felt like I needed to put that reminder out there.
Thank you. Julie?
I don't want the board to do anything that they feel is in a rush. However, if you do not make a decision until December, that is going to give us that much less time to work with our community partners, prepare our families, help to figure out all of the ins and outs, and make sure that we have things like transportation. Of course, we will do it, but if we're not making a decision until December 14th, then we have an even greater amount to do in a shorter amount of time at the same time while we're doing the transition to the second semester, which is going to be significant also. I just want to say that, so that that could be part of the consideration about whether a decision is made tonight or is postponed. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Crystal?
I just add a little bit in thinking about how big of a deal it is for us to come and ask the board to change the calendar in such a significant way that we move every professional development day, early release. We considered every holiday. That's a big deal for us. And I don't know if it's been said here tonight that we don't take that lightly. Not only has everything else been said that's super important about the need for both, you know, families and students and teachers, but I guess the only thing I would add to that is if we're going to take this jump, I think we take it. There's so many uncertainties in this year. I would worry a little bit about us saying it's important for us to revisit it. And it's not because it's not important, but I feel like if we're going to ask partners to jump on board with us and we're going to ask them to commit staff and commit resources, then we need to be as committed to them as they are to us. And we need to honor the fact that it's going to be every Thursday until the end of the school year. I think for parents who might change their work schedule or apply for a job or not apply for a job, or go back to work whenever this happens and take Thursdays off so they could be home with their young children and not have resources, I think it's only fair for us to, again, be as consistent as possible. And then, of course, for teachers, if you really want to see them get the best results, you allow them the planning time they need that is extended out over the course of time. So if I start looking over student data in January, I revisit it in March, I revisit it in May, and I really see the growth across that time period. Whereas if I just get it once, or I get it in January and February, but I don't get a chance to review it again in March, I'm not sure that I could actually track the growth that I need to track to really develop enough understanding about my students to really know where they are. So I would say if we're going to move forward with it, we think about all the inconsistencies and what we don't know could happen. We don't know where we're going to be in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but we can guarantee this time is something that we commit to. So if we do it, I just hope we can do it for the rest of the year and understand what a big commitment it is for us to ask that of all of the stakeholders involved. That's our students, our partners, our parents, our teachers, and our administrators, because we're all going to put in a lot of work. Everybody is, if we decide to do this. So if we do it, my recommendation is we do it for the long haul. Thank you.
Christy. Thank you, Crystal.
I'd like to go back to, I mean, I think we should vote on this tonight rather than do a first read. I honestly was hoping to promote that we start this earlier rather than waiting till January, but in listening to Julie, I understand the reason why, you know, we need to get those community partners in line. So I understand not starting till January, but I also think that that's really important to give people time to get childcare, to figure out what they're going to do. And I've said this before, I think parents need to be aware that we could go remote any day. And so I think all parents need to have a backup plan. I think they need to be looking into what am I going to do with my kids if we go remote, because that could happen. It could happen tomorrow. We don't know when that could happen. But I would rather see us. I don't hear anybody opposed to this. It sounds like all of the support from the principals and the administrators and the board are in favor. And so, I mean, I would be willing to make a motion. I'm not now, but I would just say that I think we should move forward. And also, this is the first time the full board has discussed this, but teachers and the principals have been talking about this for months. The Teacher Association presidents have known it's been in discussion for a long time. And so the teachers have been waiting for a long time for the board to have this discussion. And I don't know that it's fair to keep pushing it off.
Well, and to add to what Christy has said, I think, you know, we talked about this when Christy and I were meeting with the Teacher Association presidents and negotiating out the MOA. This was a piece of the conversation, and the fact that it wasn't a one size fits all with respect to high school and the K-8. And so that, you know, we didn't have an answer right there and then, and agreed that we would try and get creative. And like she said, it's been a discussion that's on the table. So. Lily.
I just want to say thank you, everyone, for having this discussion, because everyone that's added different things has given me more to think about. And Crystal, I really appreciate what you just said. You know, I like to think I try to think of everything, but I really hadn't thought of the repercussions of changing it up if it wasn't working for everyone in a month. So I really appreciate what you said, and I totally support it.
Well, you know, if people want to move forward, would someone like to make a motion? Christy.
Am I moving to accept the proposal, or am I moving to accept the proposed calendar changes? It's the calendar, correct?
Well, Mark, you correct me, but I think it might be two pieces where we would be moving to accept the proposal, but then we would also have to accept the calendar change.
Correct, Heather. If the board chose to accept the proposal, I think that's one motion. And then I think subsequent to that, it's to adopt the changes to the calendar as recommended through the proposal.
All right, then I move to accept the proposal that Thursday become an early release day for K through 8. And I guess I'll add that I would move to continue these half-day Thursdays until the end of the 2021 school year.
I'll second that.
So that was a Christy motion and Susan second. Are there other questions or comments before we go to a vote? All right,
I think didn't Lily second it? No? Okay.
Okay, hang on, let me find my page again. Here we go.
I heard Lily second it.
What's that?
I also heard Lily as the second.
Oh, really?
I don't know if it was her or not.
Lily, Susan, you guys want to duke it out?
As long as it's seconded, it doesn't have to be me. It doesn't
All right.
matter.
Sorry, I saw Susan on my screen. Can we stick with that? Thank you. All right, so I'll go down the list for voting. Susan McCready?
Yes.
Kate Chaplin?
Approved.
Heather Jones, approved. Dwayne Bolt?
Approve.
Marie Yarborough?
Approve.
Lily Simas?
Approve.
Christy LaSquadro?
Approve.
John Bench,
Yes.
Susan Allen,
Approve.
Jim Sawyer,
Approve.
Heidi Lawson,
Approve.
Jessica Stewart,
Approve.
Roger St. Amon,
Yes.
Jennifer Benilla,
Approved.
Gary Burr,
Approve.
Tom Reeve,
Approve.
and Tammy Tripler.
Approve.
Okay, thank you. There you go. Thank you, Julie, and all of the A team for all of your work. I also appreciate all the comments that we've received via public, as well as the support and comments the principals have shared here today. So that's part one. We're going to need to now approve a change to the 2021 calendar. Heidi.
Heather, can I, so just to be completely clear in doing the calendar change, because I think, if I may, I want to go through and double check with Julie and Selena. I think you could take action on the calendar at the December meeting. It doesn't stop us from moving forward in the proposal, but I really want to make sure that we're really clear and consistent across the board. Julie, do you have any reservations with that? We can take action on the calendar and still move forward, because this proposal does not start until January, number one. Number two, with the board's vote, we can still move forward with planning on logistics, and then we could bring any recommendations for any calendar change in December, correct? Okay, Heather, with your permission, I'd like to double check, because the worst thing would be that we have to come back and make an adjustment. And I do want to make sure we're lockstep on all the calendars.
It's probably wise. Okay.
Thank
you. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And continuing to move on. We don't have any other action items, correct? Do we have other business? Okay, other business?
I have none at this time.
We don't have any further public comment.
And any public comment we receive, we will certainly report it at the next meeting, Heather.
Correct. Yep. Thank you. Future agenda items, you have December approval of administrative review of consolidated MDI RSS AOS 91 emergency response plan. We'll probably have, budget discussion. We'll have the approval to change to the calendar.
You you can have, if you want, a data presentation based on the work that Jill and I have been doing, and also the you'll have a draft of the 2020 report of the administrators.
Okay, great. Thank you. So our next meeting is Monday, December 14th. And sorry, Mark just texted me and said Todd's waving. Sorry, Todd.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I tried to get this in earlier that, back to what Crystal was saying, which is really important about information and consistency. If we don't vote on the calendar tonight, can we still make the calendar changes, the tentative changes, public so that our community knows what's going on? Okay.
Yes, Todd. And Heather, may I?
Please.
Yeah, I think it's important that the principals get that information out via newsletters, and absolutely, yes, we will certainly do that. Thank you.
I do appreciate, though, Todd, I will say that I think that Crystal and Selena and I went over it pretty thoroughly, but it was for the purpose of illustrating to you what the calendar would look like. So I do appreciate the opportunity for Mark to go over it and to make sure that all of our questions are answered. And I also appreciate the opportunity when we bring a revised calendar to have those changes in the professional days be used to support teachers for additional time, to go back to Lily's point and others earlier. Because
I
that
guess
was
you know where I'm going with that. It's really about communications and getting them out as clearly and as effectively as we can. So that's all I'm asking.
Yep. No, I think it's a good point. Marie?
Will the proposal in the PowerPoint be connected to the agenda on the AOS website or something? Just those two. We got three things, I think, after the fact that weren't linked into the agenda that are sort of essential to the work we did tonight. I feel as though those should be linked into the agenda or some way other than principals getting them out in the newsletters, that they're there in a public way. I send everybody to the AOS website. Sometimes people don't even know we have one, right? And then it has all the stuff that we talk about in it. So I think it's really essential that it gets connected to the AOS website via the agenda, in addition to any work that the principals do to reach out to individual communities. If we could do that, that would be fantastic.
We will include it in the agenda, and I know that the link to these will be included in the agenda. And I know Selena is taking minutes, so we'll make sure that we get that out. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so then we have, all right, not seeing any other hands. I'm toggling between my two screens and then my other documents. We have an executive session, so I do need a motion, but before we do that, Mark, was there a link for our executive session?
So what's going to happen is that when you vote to go into, the short answer is the board will stay on this link.
Okay.
Because it's interactive. When the board votes to go into executive session, then we're going to have a transition period, and Josh will close the public link.
Okay.
And the administrators and others that are not going to be part of that will check out of this, and then you and I will do a check, and I'll backtrack with Josh to make sure we're secure. And that will not be recorded, obviously. And then following the executive session, the board will just adjourn.
Okay, we'll come out of that and adjourn. Okay, that's fine. I do just want to remind everybody that is going to be a part of the executive session that we're all, either sitting at home or whatnot. And so we do need to make sure that we have full privacy in our homes for the executive session. So I will take a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Oh, second.
So that was, who moved it? Thanks, Jennifer. And then Susan
Me.
McCready.
I was
Yeah,
on mute.
I just finally saw your hand, sorry. And then Susan McCready, a second. All right. Oh, do I have to read through this again, Mark? Everybody's.
No, Heather, if it's unanimous, and you're fine to move forward.
Okay. All right. Well, then let's take our steps to go into executive